which flavor to get? It's all about taste, really. Hi guys, and welcome to my latest video, and today we're going to talk about in-ears called NF Audio NA2 Plus. And some of you have already maybe saw my video on NF Audio NM2 Plus, and you probably know that I praised these quite a lot. I actually kept using them after the review, so these are my to-go earphones when I actually step outside of my home. NA2 Plus are very similar. As you can see, aside from the color option, it's basically the exact same design and the exact same housing, and the price is also $169, which makes this a very interesting review, but the one that I'm actually going to keep short. And that's because these two share most of the same qualities, but they actually bring those in a different tonality, in a different flavor, if you will. And I'll quickly go over those qualities before I actually focus on differences. So for those of you who didn't watch NM2 Plus review, I actually said that these are probably my favorite headphones up to $200, at least among the ones that I personally tried. They sound lively and dynamic, detail retrieval is great, and sense of soundstage is decent. They're also quite airy up top, but never excessively so, never annoyingly bright or sharp or edgy sounding. And all of these qualities basically apply to NA2 Plus also. What's different this time is their tonality and their tuning. So, while NM2 Plus offers pretty much your typical V-shaped response, meaning you have emphasized bass line, then you have emphasized that upper, mid-range and lower highs region. NA2 Plus is more balanced. Their bass line is a little bit tamer, less emphasized but more controlled, and because of that it also feels slightly less punchy and less involving. But also higher spectrum, that upper mid-range part, is also a little bit tamer. And because of that, they are not always as sparkly sounding. But the other side of that coin is that the lower mid-range and mid-range just in general is more in focus. It's more prominent. So, for example, vocals sound more natural to my ears. Sound overall is somehow denser in the mid-range. I feel that the mid-range is richer sounding through NA2 Plus. All in all, I feel that their frequency response is just tuned better. When I say better, I mean in terms of this being hi-fi product, and that means high fidelity. I feel that NA2 Plus are higher in fidelity. They're truer to the source than NM2 Plus. But if you like that V-shaped response, if you like a little bit extra excitement brought by emphasized bassline and emphasized upper mid-range, then you might as well like NM2 Plus more. And I think that's perfectly fine, especially for some sort of use case scenarios. And I'll try to explain this one a little bit better. So for example, when I was just sitting here in my home, everything is silent, there is no excessive noise anywhere near me, I definitely preferred NA2 Plus. As I said, they're higher fidelity product. Mid-range is more prominent, denser sounding, richer with details. These higher registers that are more tame are actually more natural sounding. And the bass line is definitely more controlled, tidier, neater. Not as punchy, but also not as bloated a little bit as with NM2 Plus. But things might actually change once you step out of your house and once you go out into the real world and some of the real use case scenarios for these in-ears. For example, if I get into a public transport, and in my city here in Belgrade, we use a lot of trams, for example, and these have this sort of low bass trembling all the time while you are in them. And the same goes for most of the buses and trains, actually. Because of this, in-ears, when listened in such loud environment, with a lot of low frequency trembling, you tend to notice bass line a little bit less. And if anything, in such loud environment, in-ears sometimes tend to sound a little bit thinner, like you're lacking a little bit of that bass energy and bass oomph, because your hearing system, your cognitive system, is actually adjusting to that constant low rambling of surrounding traffic and trains and trucks and cars, and it's actually phasing it out, but it phases out your bass line from your in-ears too. And in such scenarios, I sometimes actually preferred NM2+, because they add that additional power to the bass line that in a very quiet environment of my room can sound overemphasized, even a little bit bloated compared to these. In such loud environment, non-ideal environment, I actually preferred it sometimes. And that's especially true if I combine this with like the music that I usually listen when I'm outside. And that's usually some sort of older recordings like AC/DC or 80s pop or 70s rock and roll, things like that. These albums are often not that lush when it comes to production. There is no a lot of thickness and weight on that older production. It can sound a little bit thin and energyless. And then you add that outside loudness and noise and everything that mostly depletes your sensation of bassline, and I actually sometimes prefer NM2+ outside. To make some useful conclusion here, what I'm saying is that in ideal conditions and in quiet environment, I actually preferred NA2+, and I think it's a higher fidelity product among these two. In some less than ideal situations and with some less than ideal production in older recordings, I actually enjoyed the way NM2+ is sweetening the deal with that slight oomph in the bass section especially. I didn't care that much for its added upper mid-range zest. I actually almost every time preferred that on NA2+. I think it's just smoother, more natural sounding. But when it comes to the bass line, as I said, in some situations I did find that emphasized bass and upper bass, slightly bloated even, to be very attractive in certain conditions. What we're having here is basically two great in-ears with slightly different flavor. And if I really had to choose one of these, it would probably be an NA2+. So that would be all for today, guys. If you liked the video, then click that button, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the future reviews, and also consider becoming a patron if you want to support this kind of open and unbiased reviews. See you next time. Bye.